When it comes to offering customizable embroidery products, there are primarily just a handful of product types that you will deal with. The product types revolve around hats, polos, bags, and jackets. Now, when it comes to these products, most of them are not that difficult to sew, but each of them have types of products that you really want to avoid trying to sew, as the end result doesn't always come out as good. For instance, when it comes to polos, you want to go with typically a tighter weave polo. If it's a real loose material, it often won't sew as well or particularly wash as well, and that's when you see the material actually pucker up, in which the thread kind of squinches together and it does not look good. This is again often on materials that are really thin and have a very thin weave. The thicker the weave, the easier it is for the thread to be penetrated and then actually be secured into the material. When it comes to jackets, thicker jackets can be a nightmare to sell. When it comes to Carhartts, for instance, they're very popular, but they are very thick. And not only are they thick, they're very expensive. So if you sew it and something happens to it, you're gonna be out a lot of money. So when it comes to sewing jackets, make sure if it's an expensive product that you are sure it's gonna sew without issue, because you're gonna have to replace it otherwise. And when it comes to embroidery, out of all the decoration processes, it's probably the number one where a customer wants to bring their item and have you sew onto it. And I must advise you, this is often a bad idea. One, you can't replace it. And two, you typically aren't used to sewing onto that material unless it's something you have sewn on before, and who knows what can happen. Also, when it comes to hats, a lot of customers think they know exactly what they want and what is possible when it comes to sewing a hat. If you were to go to Lids, for instance, the #1 retailer for hats, they often sew them right there in front of you, and you actually see them create the hat itself. What you don't see are them sewing all of the hats that they're actually selling that are three-dimensional, meaning that the sew actually comes off of the hat. 3D embroidery is done by placing a piece of foam over where the thread is sewn, and then after it's finished being sewn, the remainder of the foam is taken away, and then the thread is actually heated using a heat gun to puff it up. 3D embroidery is extremely cool when it comes to hats, but it is not as easy as you think when it comes to doing it onto a typical embroidery machine. Whenever Lids actually has all their hats sewn, when it comes to the three-dimensional embroidery, they're actually sewing them flat before the hat is actually constructed with a bill. So a 6-panel hat, for instance, is really just 6 panels laid out that is then eventually sewn into a circle and then has the bill sewn onto it. Well, before they do all that work, they just take that middle panel that's going to be sewn and they sew that because it's flat. The flatter an item is, the easier it is to sew. So whenever your customer comes at you and they want a 3D embroidered hat, advise them the best way to really go about this is to actually have it sewn onto the first panel and then have the entire hat constructed around it, because that'll give you the best results and also give you a larger sew area on the hat. If you have any questions about which products to avoid when it comes to embroidery, please do not hesitate contacting us. Thank you.